Becoming an entrepreneur takes constant growth, and often we get held back by that tricky little thing called imposter syndrome.
So in today's episode, we're going to talk about some of the different types of imposter syndrome, how it can creep up, and how to combat it when it does.
Are you frustrated by a lack of momentum in your business? Tired of putting in long hours doing what everyone says you should and still not making money? Sounds like you're ready for Lifestyle Builders. We'll help you get back on track, taking action, and seeing results. Head over to joinlifestylebuilders.com today to get started. All right. Today's topic is very important one, if I do say so myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's one that, comes up for everybody.
Yep.
And ironically, everybody thinks they're the only one that has it.
Yes. Yes. It's funny how that works, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many times we've had people look at us and compare themselves to us, or we've looked at, other people, and oftentimes you might actually be at the same level or experiencing the same things, but it's kind of like that grass is greener. You just assume, oh, everyone else has it together and I'm the only one that's a mess.
Yes. Yep. I'm the only one that's a mess and that's pretending I'm not a mess.
Yeah. Well, and, so I think this is really important to talk about because there's a lot of stuff that we go through as entrepreneurs, and because you're always facing new challenges and coming across things you haven't done before, this imposter syndrome constantly comes up. Mm-hmm. So it comes up when you're new to business, and then it really comes up every time you're shifting into a new level or getting into a new stage of business where you maybe haven't been there before and haven't faced those challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's really, I think it's a struggle for most of us because it's an internal thing. It's an inner voice, and it makes us doubt ourselves. And doubt is something that's really hard to overcome a lot of times because it's you in your own head talking to yourself rather than being able to have conversations with somebody else who's going to tell you, hey, what are you worried about? You've got this. It's hard to tell yourself that.
Well, I was going to say, and I think that's one of the, we always talk about getting support. And I think that's one of the most important reasons to have support and have that outside perspective, because it is so easy, especially when maybe something didn't go right, or when, you made a mistake. It's so easy to internalize that and get caught up in your own head. Whereas somebody from the outside, especially somebody that is further along, like a mentor, can be like, this is natural. Mm-hmm. This is a small misstep. Let's figure out what you can learn from it. And then let's figure out how to move forward from here. But if you don't have that outside, logical voice, this type of stuff can derail you and stop you from being able to move forward.
Yeah. Well, it's very easy to kind of look at what you've done and attribute it to luck. Well, I'm just lucky because I had these opportunities come to me and I took them, and, other people might not have had those opportunities. So what makes me the one that's better than them just because I took those opportunities as they came? You're attributing it to luck, which most of the time has nothing to do with luck. It's the things that you did and you worked towards and you sacrificed. But when you're looking in hindsight, a lot of times you don't see that.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of people attribute things to luck, and sure, there's always an element of luck, but there's also a lot of things that, there's a quote out there, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And that's what I think we often forget when we look back on things. It's so easy to attribute it to luck and not realize that, no, it was because I put the hard work in, or because I set myself up to be able to do that. And it's so easy for us to discount that, especially, ironically, the more you learn about something, the more you forget about how difficult it was in the beginning and how much you know. We all discredit our expertise, but then you go talk to somebody else who has never been in that thing that you're doing, and you look it was funny. I put a post up yesterday about the podcast, and I was like, we're trying to change this thing and whatever. And somebody's like, I know what all those words mean, but I have no idea what they mean together. And so, you can look at somebody like me and says, oh, well, I'm not really an expert at a podcast. But then you look at it compared to somebody else,
you are.
They're like, oh my gosh, you know a lot. So I think it's so easy, especially with social media.
Yes.
Especially when you're seeing everybody else, and they, from your perspective, it's so easy to to put that frame out, like, oh, they're experts, like, oh, they're crushing everything.
Well, yeah, you look at people. I mean, like Amy Porterfield is massively successful, and everyone looks at her like, "Oh my gosh, she's got it all together." Guess what? Amy has an amazing team helping her put all that stuff together. She's not doing it by herself, So don't attribute other people's success like solely to them either, because they have people supporting them.
Yep.
So you don't assume that, but because you're by yourself and someone else is the face of their business, that you're on equal playing field.
Well, I was gonna say that's such a good point, and it's actually been, I think, one of the coolest things with all the experiences I've had, whether it was in corporate, whether it was consulting for these companies, or whether it's been all the entrepreneurs that we worked with. We get to see the front of a business and what it looks like. And then we get to see behind the scenes and what's really going on. And I'll tell you, every business I've worked with has issues. I mean, even your favorite company, if you were to go behind the scenes, every day they've got support tickets coming in. They've got unhappy customers. They've got financial pressure. So that exists across the board. Yeah. And to your point, the bigger a company is and the more successful, the more support that there is. So oftentimes the story or the view we have in our head is very different than reality.
Yeah. And so quick, before we move on and dive in deeper, give everyone a quick definition of what imposter syndrome is.
So there's different definitions out there, but really what imposter syndrome comes down to is that, like you said earlier, you're doubting your accomplishments or attributing them to luck, rather than realizing that those accomplishments came because of something you did and a competence or an expertise that you've been developing. So
basically you feel like a fraud, but you shouldn't.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, this often happens when you're getting into a new area, and ironically, it's kind of funny. Oftentimes, this happened when I got into wine and like when we opened our wine and liquor store. At first I was like, oh, I know stuff about wine. There's reds and there's whites and there's Cabernets, and like, that's all you need to know. Right. And so it's almost like you're ignorant to everything you don't know. And a lot of people that don't have imposter syndrome are just ignorant to everything else that's out there. And it's almost like once you get exposed, like once we got like our first order book and we looked at everything else, I'm like, I know nothing about wine.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
Perfect reference. But so it's almost like when you get exposed and realize everything that you don't know, you discredit all the stuff that you do know and you just focus on everything you don't. And then it can make you feel really small.
Yep.
Rather than being like, this is everything I know. I'm not going to know everything in the world, but
I'm okay with what I've got.
Yeah. What is the next thing that I need to learn in order to move forward?
Yeah.
So it's more looking at the progress you've made thus far and how far you've come, not how far you have to go or everything that you don't know that you think the rest of the world does.
Yeah, it's kind of like looking at a huge staircase that you have to go up, and you're looking from where you're at all the way to the top, and you feel hopeless because it's like, how am I ever going to get up there? Instead of just looking at the next step or two.
Well, and then you turn around, look backwards, you're like, oh, I've already climbed half the staircase. So you're not starting from scratch.
Yes.
But it's like if you're only looking ahead and where the gap is, then you're struggling because you're not realizing how far you've already came and how much you closed that gap.
Yeah.
And I think this is a huge challenge specifically for entrepreneurs and high achievers, because the way entrepreneurs think is we have a vision of what the future looks like. And usually that vision is very different from what most people think. It's very different from what it is now. And so we've got this vision, and then we've got to basically come back to the present day where that vision isn't reality, and we're trying to merge the two. And so it can be very difficult when you've got these grand ambitions and a vision for what things look like. And then you look at where you're at today or where your company is, and you're like, we're not there. Who are we to have that big vision? We don't have the skills. Who are we to want to go after something like that? And, oftentimes I think society and other people will actually discourage you from your dreams. They'll say things aren't realistic. There's a quote out there that I'm going to butcher.
Of course.
It's like people say that, things are not realistic until they actually are,
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. And so as entrepreneurs, oftentimes what we're doing is we're seeing what other people don't, and then we're pursuing it until it just becomes a norm.
Well, and I think it's hard when you're a solopreneur.
Absolutely.
Because then it's on you. Like, who am I to be doing this? Do I know enough? Am I enough? Like, a lot of us are coming into this. It's such a low barrier to entry. You're jumping into entrepreneurship. You're on your own. A lot of us are doing some sort of service type business where it's us doing something for somebody else. So you are literally the face of your business. You are the team. You're the only one. So, as you're starting to get into uncomfortable positions and as you're starting to put yourself out there, those are thoughts that are constantly going to be running through your head. I mean, the first no you get when you put an offer out there to somebody, you're like, oh my gosh, they don't want to hire me because I don't know what I'm doing and I shouldn't even be trying this. Like, who am I to think that I could help this person? So it can be a really tough spot to be in if you're bogged down in that imposter syndrome. So today we're going to talk about some of the different types of imposter syndrome, because of course, like everything else, there is different ways that you can be experiencing this. And then just some of the ways that you can maybe change your perspective or reframe it for yourself so that you can start to move in a positive direction and get past that imposter syndrome.
Yeah. And so as we get into these, you're going to definitely see some overlap between the different types.
Or you could be more than one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, I think what'll be cool as we do this is, I know I'm definitely more than one.
Oh, so I am for sure.
I think part of what we'll do is maybe talk about some of the experiences of where this has come up for us so that everyone listening or watching realizes that, like, hey, even though it may look like we've got it all together, we definitely go through this as well.
Do not.
So the first one is really the perfectionist.
Hello.
So this is the type of person that has to have everything perfect. They always feel like they could have done things better. And they may struggle to delegate or to have somebody else involved.
Man, it's like you just described me or something.
And this is a very common one, especially like you said for that solopreneur. Because so there's a book out there called The E-Myth, and in it, Michael Gerber talks about what happens is a lot of people are really good at their day job or the skill, and then they say, well, let me go start a business, and they don't realize all the other stuff that comes with that, and then they struggle to give up the thing they're really good at, but likely they shouldn't be doing as they try to grow their business. So if you're the perfectionist, a couple things that you can do to help kind of get rid of this imposter syndrome. The first one is realize that done is better than perfect. Yep,
that is one that I had to learn. Very, very hard lesson to learn.
And here's the reality. Perfect doesn't exist. So if you're striving for perfect, what ends up happening, like most people have heard of like the 80-20 rule. What ends up happening is that when you first do something, you're actually going to cover most of it. And then if you keep striving to make it better or for perfection, a couple things are going to happen. There's less and less that you can actually add to something or do. And the impact of each thing you add doesn't actually get you the same result. And if you're not actually putting something out to the world, you don't know if it's actually going to work or not. This could be a new product idea that you have. This could be a marketing campaign. This could be a new process. Until you use it, you don't know. It's all just the theory in your head.
Well, and let's talk about the fact that often as perfectionists we're working off of someone else's version of what it should be. So when you're a perfectionist, you're like, oh, it has to be this. Take a step back and think why you think that. Why does it have to be that? Because a lot of times it's because somebody else told you, or the way that you learned it was from a certain person. So you feel like it has to be exactly that way that they did it. And in reality, that is not true at all. There are always different ways to do things. There's always different ways to attack a problem. So you've just got to pull yourself back a little bit. And I know this is hard coming from ex-perfectionist, recovering perfectionist. What do you want to say? Whatever you want to say.
A recovering that relapses periodically.
Having children helped a lot with that. Just going to put that out there. But you just, you take it one step at a time. So every time you do something, it's a little bit less perfect, and you're okay with that.
Yeah. Well, and so a couple other key things with this is, one, celebrate your successes. And like we talked about with the staircase, make sure that you realize how far you've come.
Mm-hmm.
And two, realize that you're going to make mistakes, and mistakes aren't actually a bad thing because mistakes allow you to learn and get better.
Yep.
So as you're, doing this, a little bit of resetting expectations, that just knowing it's not going to be perfect and realizing that when it's not perfect, that's actually an opportunity for you to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes you can get things closer to perfect faster, the faster you try them out. Because if you've got like this is a big thing with businesses right now. If it takes you a really long time to put a product out versus another company that can put a product out faster, get feedback from customers, and then do it again, that second company is going to be way better because they're getting actual feedback and they know what to adjust.
Well, you worked with a lot of that within companies when you were doing lean and agile work, and like bringing their project scopes down from like a 4-year project to, hey, let's try to do it in 2.
Mm-hmm. Well, and part of this too, if your business truly exists to serve your customer and help them solve problems, your perfectionism is actually going against your mission.
Yep.
It's actually hurting your customers because rather than giving them something that will get them 75% of the way there, for example, you're waiting until it's perfect. And in the meantime, they're struggling. And because you don't have something for them, they might go to a competitor.
Yeah.
Or
they might not do anything at all.
Exactly. And they might continue in that pain.
Yep.
So realize that your perfectionism isn't just about you, but it's about other people and the impact that can happen from there.
All right. So this next one is going to sound familiar because it's everywhere right now with all the superhero movies and things happening. So the next type is the superhero.
I was gonna say, actually, doesn't the Avengers movie come out today, the day we're recording this?
I think it's tomorrow.
But
I'm sure there's like a midnight showing tonight.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Whatever. But yes, it comes out tomorrow.
So very appropriate. So the superhero, you never feel like you're good enough. You feel like you always have to push harder. And you feel like you have to do everything yourself.
Mm-hmm. So it's very similar to the perfectionist, but a slight nuance of difference.
Yeah. Well, so the perfectionist is doing it because they want the result to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
The superhero is doing it because they want themselves to look perfect.
Mm-hmm.
They want it to seem like to everybody
like
else
everywhere,
that they're
doing everything.
Well, and that they can handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And this was something I saw in corporate a lot was, people that would work long hours. And it was funny that organizations for the longest time, I think this is shifting, in some regard now, organizations would reward somebody because they worked really long rather than the person that actually worked smart and didn't have to work as long and then could enjoy life. So the superhero is really looking at, I've got to do everything myself rather than realizing that working smarter, not harder is actually a really good thing for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So ways to kind of combat that is shifting a little bit of that internal validation. So bringing it internal and keeping it from being external. So again, stop worrying about what other people are thinking about you and take those accomplishments internally and look at what you're doing and validate like, hey, I am doing my job. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't need to be everywhere all the time and doing what everyone else thinks I should be doing.
Yeah. And I think a part of this too also comes back to like going against that like hustle mentality because a lot of that hustle mentality is like, the superhero, another word for them is the workaholic.
Yes.
They're working all the time.
Into my mind when you said that.
I was going to say they're working all the time and they're not enjoying hobbies. Like, obviously we're Game of Thrones fans, as Ariana threw the reference in earlier. But like I see people, whether it's Game of Thrones, whether it's the Super Bowl, whatever's going on and it's popular, you've got those people out there that like throw shade against it. They're like, oh, while the rest of the world's watching Game of Thrones, I'm hustling for this hour. And it's like, hey, how about you enjoy your life? How about you have some hobbies? And unfortunately, what happens for a lot of people with this superhero syndrome or workaholics is that they put everything into their work and ultimately they get depressed. They have anxiety. They don't know. Yeah, they don't know how to step away and actually enjoy things, and then part of it too is it actually creates an unhealthy dynamic if you're part of a team because this person's trying to do everything on their own. They're not being part of the team. They're trying to like outshine everyone else rather than realizing that, hey, I'm part of this team. We can all work together. It's like the Avengers when Iron Man thinks he can do everything himself rather than partnering with the rest of the team, right?
God, now you've brought two completely different references into one podcast.
We'll see how many I can do. Let's go.
All right. So the next type we're going to talk about is the natural genius.
Yeah. And full disclosure, this was me. So the natural genius is...
calling yourself a genius?
Well,
Gosh.
A natural one, yes. So this is the type of person where things come easy. And like for me, for example, I was always the guy that was bored in school. And school didn't seem challenging. Like, I know I'm probably sounding like an egomaniac or something as I say that. But like,
you're not
I just,
alone.
I naturally got good grades. I could pick up new concepts quickly. And so as a result, this natural genius, whenever you're not used to challenges. And so when challenges come up, you don't know how to react. And actually, in a lot of cases, you'll avoid them. And so it's funny because for me, this was how I was in school with academics. I think for you actually display this another way, oftentimes like with sports or with more creative stuff.
Yep. Yeah. That's where the perfectionist and the natural genius part combined was bad.
Yeah. And this is where like something that I think we figured out last year, and it stumped me for the longest time with you, was you're so good at so many things. And I see that.
Thank you.
But then there's other things you would go to do and you would like vehemently...
Oh my gosh, so much avoidance.
Avoid it. And I couldn't understand. I'm like, why are you not doing this? You're so good at everything else. And what we came to figure out was that the things you were good at, you were the natural genius at. And then anything that came hard or you didn't think you were going to succeed at, you just avoided.
Yep. Completely 100% true.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like for me, this is where it comes back to having stress or having tough situations happen early on in your life is actually a really good thing. Mm-hmm. Because for me, like I had a lot of challenges I had to overcome, and that actually helped me balance out a lot of my natural genius because I had to figure out how to overcome things that were hard.
And I did not until after college. So for me, I didn't have any practice dealing with those challenges. So that's why it took me a long time to figure it out.
Yeah. And that's actually a really good point because I think, comparing the two of us, I was able to jump into situations a lot earlier and a lot faster because I had been through more challenging situations early on, where for you, they came later and it was difficult for you to figure out how to adjust.
Ways. Yes.
So I think for the natural genius, if this is you, a couple things to realize. There's some stuff that comes easy to everyone.
Yes.
And there's many things
you may not even realize it. That's part of the problem too, is that you don't realize the things that come easy to you because they feel natural. But if you look at your life compared to somebody else's life, you are most likely very good at some things that other people are not. Mm-hmm. And you need to look at that, because if you're thinking that you're, an imposter because, you should know more things, look at the things you do know.
Yeah. Well, and part of this too, what I always tell people, like part of this might be your unfair advantage. And that's the thing with all of these, different types that we're talking about. These can all work both ways. Mm-hmm. So part of this is good.
Yes.
Like you want somebody that's more perfectionist on your team if
they're in a position where details are important.
Exactly. But as with anything, if you take it to the extreme, then it can be challenging. So for the natural genius, part of what you want to realize is take advantage of your strengths. Realize that you're going to have to do some things that you're not naturally good at. And that's actually building that muscle for you. Mm-hmm. And finally, even though something may seem like it came easy to someone else, I promise you that most of the time it didn't. And if it did, it might have been part of their natural genius. And most likely it didn't. And you just didn't see all the work that went into that success. Like people look at us now and they're like, oh my gosh, 3 businesses, you got a podcast, you got a book, you speak, blah, blah, blah.
And kids.
But
you always forget the kids.
Yeah, well, that's the easy part compared to everything else. But like, so they don't see the 3 night classes that I took during the summer to get my master's.
While I was pregnant.
While you were pregnant. They don't see the times where we were in hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt and, cutting everything back, cutting cable, not having like Friday night pizza just so we could pay our bills. They don't see all the money that we had to put into these businesses and the times when we had to avoid family functions because we had to work.
Yeah.
And so anyone that's successful has those things in their background, but you're only seeing the surface.
Exactly. All right. I feel like we went on a very large tangent, but that's totally okay because we talked about some important things. All right. So we've got 2 more types to talk about. The next one is the soloist.
So this is somewhat related to, I think the superhero. I
feel like they're all related.
They are.
It's like one of those circle diagrams where all the circles overlap.
Do you know what they're called?
No.
Come on. Come on. Venn diagram.
Oh, dang it. I should have known what it was called.
So soloist is really someone that thinks they can do everything themselves, almost like a superhero. And a part of that is because they feel like asking for help shows weakness. And, this I think is a challenge for a lot of people. And the irony with this is that when you're willing to ask for help, it actually shows strength.
Yes.
Because like something that I found out a long time ago, whatever somebody is showing to you, they're usually experiencing the opposite. So if someone is showing you strength, they're usually experiencing weakness on the inside. But if someone is willing to be vulnerable and show you what's really going on, they're usually really strong because they're confident inside and they get their confidence from internally in what they know, not the external validation. But a lot of times people that kind of fall into the soloist really don't want to ask for help. And that's where oftentimes they'll let their ego come into play. And I know for me, several times throughout like my career, things would go well and I'd have some success. And then that soloist would come in and I wouldn't want to ask for help because I wouldn't want other people to be like, oh, maybe he's not so successful because he's asking for help. What I realized was later on when you shift that, what you're actually finding is that the people that are willing to ask for help, 1, are usually more strong and confident, and 2, ultimately achieve more results because they didn't let the ego get in the way of proceeding forward.
I think that ties in a little bit to the natural genius too, because when you feel like, or I guess it maybe ties into the next one we're going to talk about, when you feel like you should know something, it's really hard to ask for help because that shows the outside world that you actually don't know all the things. And that feels really, really vulnerable and scary because when you're coming in and you're supposed to be the expert on something, asking somebody else for help is like putting a little chink in your armor. And you think everyone out there is going to be like, oh my gosh, I asked for help and they're going to think that I don't know what I'm doing. And there you go. There's the imposter syndrome.
And so to your point, the final one here is the expert. And this is actually the one that I probably fall into the most. This is the type of person that feels like you have to know everything. And it's about how much you know about a specific topic. And really what you're doing in this case is you're probably always learning. You're always seeking training. And you judge yourself based on how much you know. And for me, where this really came up for me was when I shifted from just working a corporate job and I got into consulting, I found myself increasingly in rooms with like executives and high level leaders in the company. And there was a lot of times where, I'm like this 20-something young kid in a room with these executives and these leaders
that are the same age as you.
Yeah. And, like some of these situations, I would have a leader like complaining about their kid and how they like went out and got drunk this last weekend and did something stupid and they had to bail them out. And then they'd be like, oh, they're probably about your age. And then on the next conversation, it would be like, all right, well, now I'm going to work with you on how to become a better leader. And I had so much insecurity around that. So 2 things. 1, it actually helped that I did use this to help me read a lot, learn a lot. That's part of why I went back to grad school, because I wanted to make sure I had the information. But the other thing that really became clear for me, and I got this support from mentors, was really realizing that I was never going to know everything and I didn't need to. What it really came down to was ultimately helping the person that I was trying to work with. And in a lot of cases, I didn't need to learn everything. And if I waited to help them until I learned
Then
everything,
they would have been.
I wouldn't have helped them along the way. And this is actually what a lot of people in this scenario will actually use this as procrastination. They'd be like, oh, I just got to take one more class, or I got to learn one more book before I go and implement it. And that big shift for me really came when I realized that I'm never going to know everything. I can still continue to learn, but in the meantime, I can shift this to say, how can I help you based on what I know today? And if I do find that I have gaps, I can continue closing those with my learning.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because my kind of expert imposter syndrome version is a little bit different, because mine is kind of compared with like comparisonitis, where because you are considered the expert on all things business as we jumped into this, I was constantly feeling like I didn't know enough because you were like up here and I felt like I was down here. So it was always like, oh my gosh, I don't think I can help people because I don't know as much as Tom. And it took, obviously a couple of years, but also just some very smart people who know me well to finally shake me out of that and say, you don't need to know as much as Tom. Mm-hmm. That's why he's there.
And if you know as much as Tom, then we don't need two of you because you know the same thing.
Exactly. So I needed to realize that I am my own version of an expert, and I don't need to know what everyone else out there knows. I have my own expertise, and, being comfortable and confident in that. So I know that there's probably a lot of people out there that feel similar, where the expert, they feel like they should be the expert and they're looking at somebody else as the expert and not feeling like they're their own expert. So well, it's interesting how all of these fit together.
Yeah. Well, and the way I look at this, so when I was younger, I took karate, and in Taekwondo or anything like that, there's belts. And, what you realize is that mastery, this pursuit that we're all after, has different levels. And when you start out, you have like a white belt, and then you get a stripe on it, and then you get like a yellow belt, and you keep moving on. So if you're a yellow belt, you're an expert to the people that have a white belt, right? Now, the person with the orange belt or the purple belt or the black belt,
I have no idea what the
is more of an expert than you. But for where you're at, you're still an expert to the people that aren't there yet. So this is where there's that little bit of a double-edged sword to say, you only have to be a couple steps ahead of the people that you're training, which is true in some cases, but you also have to be cognizant that there's many more steps ahead of you and where you're at, and then what you need to learn next.
Love that. All right. So we talked about this in the opening. Imposter syndrome can sneak in anywhere. Anytime you are starting something new, you're putting a new offer, a new product out, you are getting into an uncomfortable zone.
Yeah.
It happens a lot in the online space because we have to be visible to our audience, which takes a little bit more out of, like, if you're behind a computer and you're running a business and people don't really know you, they just know your business, it's a little bit less. When you have to get out in front of people and talk to them in a video or in a room and stand up in front of people, then it can really start to sneak in there, and you can start to feel like, oh my gosh, why am I here? What am I doing? And then, anytime there's underlying issues in your business that can kind of put a dent in your confidence, just watch out for those doubts to creep in, because let me tell you, once they start creeping, it's really hard to stop the flow.
Yeah, well, and like we said, ways to combat this. The first one is really just surrounding yourself with people that will support you. And part of that support is to, tell you the truth and call you out when, you're letting that overcome you.
Yeah, and people who understand you, people who understand what
people
you're
that
going
have been
through.
there.
Yeah.
Yep. People that are further along. I mean, for example, like, we're releasing a book this year. All along the way of writing, it's like, well, who are we to be authors? Like, who are we to have expertise on this thing? And so even if you're really good at what you do, and oftentimes because you're really good at what you do, you have more of this doubt. So having those people around you to, like, shake you out of that and give you the reality is big.
Yes. And one of the fun ways that I combat it personally is to keep the smile file, which is something
this was big for you.
It was really big for me. You basically take anything anyone has ever said about you, anything nice, or, if someone posted up like, oh my gosh, they helped me so much, you're going to save those. You're going to screenshot them, take a picture with your phone, have them record a video for you, and you're going to keep it in your smile file, because anytime you're feeling doubt or like you're a fraud and you shouldn't be doing this, you can go in and read those messages from people that know you, that you've helped in some way. Maybe they've been clients of yours. Go in and read those messages because they're going to remind you, one, why you're doing this in the first place, and two, that you really do know things and that you are helping people.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So with that, actions. So I'll start things off. So we went through those like 5 different types of imposter syndrome. So I want you guys to take a look at yourselves and see which one resonated most with you, and leave it in the comments wherever you're listening to this video.
Mm-hmm. And I have a similar action for you. I would love to hear from you, to have you guys get vulnerable with us about a time that you encountered imposter syndrome, and what did you do to tackle it?
That's a good one. All right. So with that, want to talk to you guys about Lifestyle Builders Incubator. So if you're struggling with imposter syndrome, one of the best ways to handle this is to be surrounded by other people that are going through the same thing that you are. And so with our incubator program, part of it is teaching you new skills. Part of it is coaching and mentoring. But then part of it is also surrounding yourself with other people like you. And one of the things that comes up very often is like, who am I to do this? Who am I to create this business? And we've had so many people in the program that have been like, thank you so much for that, because when I see that somebody else is going through the same type of stuff that I am, or maybe they're a step ahead of me or a step behind me, it helps me to understand where I'm at and that this is just a natural part of the process. So if you guys are starting your business or launching a new product or service and you've got some of this imposter syndrome, I invite you guys to come and join the Lifestyle Builders Incubator, and you can find that at joinlifestylebuilders.com.
And exciting, less than a month from now, our book will be on Amazon for the ebook, and you'll be able to pre-order the physical copy. So this is, we've talked about a lot of our personal experiences here today on the show. If you would love to learn more about the challenges that we've gone through and, kind of how we came up with that framework of the Lifestyle Builders GPS, I encourage you to go to tomandariana.com/book so that you can find out all that you need to know about our book and get links to order it when it comes out.
Absolutely.
Yay. All right, you guys, it's been another great episode with Tom and Ariana, your hosts and lifestyle builders.
And as always, I want you guys to remember that it's your life, your business, your way. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Hey, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you know another entrepreneur who may benefit from hearing this show, we would so appreciate you being a good friend and sharing it with them. Are you dreaming of a life of financial freedom and more time to spend with your loved ones? Want to build your business to support that dream? You need Lifestyle Builders, a mentorship program designed to meet you where you are and give you strategic and custom guidance so you can build the business you need for the life you crave. Become a lifestyle builder at joinlifestylebuilders.com. Are you a Lifestyle Builders podcast fan? We'd love to hear from you. Head on over to tomandariana.com/iTunes and leave us a review.